Everything you have been told about wilderness survival is wrong, not slightly wrong, foundationally wrong. The modern survival industry has handed you titanium multi-tools, GPS beacons, and $40 emergency blankets, and called that preparedness. But in 1823, a man named Hugh Glass was mauled nearly to death by a grizzly bear in the Dakota wilderness, stripped of his rifle and his shot pouch by the two men paid to stay by his side, left with broken ribs and open wounds in the August heat, and then crawled. No fire, no shelter, no rescue signal, more than 100 miles of open country until he found a trading post and lived. He did not survive because of the right product. He survived because, before they took everything from him, he had been carrying the right 12 things. And we stopped carrying most of them the moment the modern world told us we no longer needed to. The man you actually need to understand is not a legend. He is a historical record. His name appears in the account ledgers of Fort Hall, Oregon, dated August 5th, 1834. Those ledgers survived. They tell us exactly what he bought, what he carried, and what he trusted his life to every single day he spent in the Rocky Mountains. His name was Osborne Russell. He was 20 years old when he signed on as a trapper with Nathaniel Wyeth's Fur Brigade, and over the next 9 years, he kept a meticulous journal, one of the most important primary documents of the entire fur trade era, recording every supply purchase, every survival crisis, and every item he wore on his body and carried in the small leather bag slung across his chest. That bag did not have a romantic name, not yet. The men who lived and died in the Rockies in the 1830s called it a bullet pouch, a shot pouch, or simply a hunting bag. The term possible's bag, the phrase you have heard in every documentary, every YouTube video, every outdoor magazine, was never used by the mountain men themselves for this shoulder pouch. Rufus Sage, who lived among the trappers and published his first-hand observations in 1846, described exactly how it was worn, suspended from the neck, fastened to the belt in front, with the powder horn crossing from the opposite shoulder, 2 leather straps forming an X across the chest, everything anchored to the body so it could not be pulled away in a river crossing or a bear attack. The possible pack, where that word lived, was the larger pack on the saddle mule. The maybe you'll need it supplies. The hunting bag was not the possible pack. The hunting bag was the non-negotiable. It was the line between coming home and not. Walk with me for a moment, because this is where it gets remarkable. The year is 1823. You are standing at the base of the Black Hills in what is now western South Dakota. The man beside you is Jedediah Smith, arguably the greatest explorer America ever produced, a man who would cross the continent twice before he was 30. He steps into a thicket of brush. A grizzly bear explodes from the undergrowth. The bear takes his head in its mouth. And then something happens that no weekend survival course will ever teach you. The bear bites down and hits his bullet pouch. The leather bag, packed with lead balls and the iron tools of his trade, absorbs enough force to the torso to spare the catastrophic rib damage that would have killed him. His companion Jim Kleiman watches it happen and writes in his diary that the bear grabbed Smith by the middle, fortunately, catching by the ball pouch and butcher knife which he broke. What the grizzly's jaws hit was his gear, what kept Jedediah Smith alive long enough to be sewn back together using a needle and thread from a companion sewing kit was the fact that he was carrying the right things, worn the right way, in exactly the right place. So what did they actually carry? Because that is the question worth losing sleep over. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you felt genuinely prepared? Not phone in hand, actually prepared. A tool you made yourself, a skill built through repetition, something that would still function if every battery died and every signal dropped. Drop that story below, because what you're about to discover is going to completely change what the word prepared means to you. The modern survival industry wants you to believe that preparedness is a product category. They have built a $12 billion global market on that belief. Walk into any outdoor retailer today, and you'll find piezoelectric fire starters that crack in cold weather, tactical folding knives with 37 features that do none of them particularly well, and GPS devices that require a subscription, a charged battery, and a satellite overhead to function. The Mountain Man system required none of those dependencies. It required knowledge, repetition, and 12 specific items, most of which cost roughly what you would spend on a single coffee. Every one of them would function in a blizzard, at altitude, in the dark, or with no signal whatsoever. That is the difference between a system and a product. The mountain men built a system. The survival industry sold you products. Here is the part that should make you genuinely angry. This knowledge was not lost by accident. It was deliberately displaced. As the fur trade collapsed in the 1840s and 1850s and wagon roads replaced trappers' trails, the supply chains that had sustained the mountain man's self-sufficient system were replaced by commercial alternatives. Mass-produced blades replaced hand-selected Sheffield knives, catalogs replaced skills, and the integrated knowledge of a generation of men who had refined their kit through actual stakes was swapped for convenience that could be packaged and sold. Not because the old system failed. It was replaced because it could not be marketed. A man who casts his own bullets, makes his own char cloth, and repairs his own moccasins is, commercially speaking, a terrible customer. And then the world blamed you when the hollow replacement it handed you fell short. Your body is not broken. Your instincts are not wrong. You were given broken instructions. Now let's open the bag. The first item is the fire kit, and not the kind you're picturing. Every trapper carried flint, a fire steel, and what the journals call punk. George Ruxton, a British officer who lived with the mountain men and published his account in 1849, described it precisely. The bullet pouch always contained flint, steel, and pieces of punk to make fire. Punk meant char cloth, cotton or linen scorched in a sealed tin until it was fully carbonized. Char cloth does not burst into flame. It catches a spark and holds it, giving the trapper time to transfer that glow into a nest of dry grass, close it, wave it gently through the air, and produce flame within 30 seconds, even in damp conditions. A modern butane lighter fails at altitude, fails in cold, fails when it gets wet. Char cloth fails at none of those moments. The second item is spare flints, plural, always plural. A good flint lasts 30 to 60 strikes before needing to be resharpened, and roughly 300 strikes before replacement. Osborne Russell's Fort Hall Ledger entry for February 1835 reads simply, 1 dozen fusee flints, because a mountain man who ran out of flints in January in the Rockies was a mountain man who was going to freeze. No flint means no fire. No fire means no warmth, no cooked food, and no way to signal. The entire survival chain breaks at the very first link. The third item is the bullet mold paired with bar lid, not just precast balls, the mold itself. A trapper carrying only finished ammunition was dependent on resupply. A trapper carrying a scissors-style bag mold and a small bar of lid could produce ammunition over a campfire in the field indefinitely. He was self-sustaining at the most critical level. The mold was matched to his rifle's bore, typically .50 to .54 caliber, and each ball was cast, cooled, and wrapped in a small greased linen patch before loading. That patched ball spinning down a rifled barrel gave the mountain man accurate fire at distances that astonished European observers accustomed to smoothbore muskets. It is also what kept a man in the field, even with an iron arrowhead lodged against his spine, because when you can make your own ammunition, you choose your moment to fight. The fourth item is the belt knife. Fixed blade, 9 to 10 inches. Sheffield steel, worn on the right side of the belt where it could be drawn with either hand. Russell's Fort Hall Ledger records Sheffield butcher knives at $1.25 each. These knives skinned beaver and buffalo, split firewood, prepared food, repaired gear, and in extreme necessity fought men who wanted everything else in the bag. When the grizzly broke Jedediah Smith's butcher knife on the bite, Kleiman records that his companions were visibly shaken, not by the blood, but by the loss of the blade. That tells you everything about where the knife sat in the hierarchy of the kit. The fifth and sixth items travel together, the awl and the sinew. The awl was a sharpened iron spike in a carved handle, deer horn, elk horn, cherry wood, living in a small sheath sewn inside the hunting bag. The sinew was dried buffalo back sinew, kept in long strips, softened with saliva, and split to whatever thickness the repair required. Together, they replaced every modern sewing kit, every repair kit, every roll of duct tape the survival industry has ever sold you. When moccasins failed, and failing moccasins in the Rockies were a genuine death sentence, the awl punched through the leather and the sinew drew tight. Charles Larpenteur, 40 years a fur trader, wrote that he always kept a piece of dried buffalo sinew in his bullet pouch, specifically to mend moccasins on the trail. The seventh item is the whetstone, and this is the one modern people have abandoned most completely. A whetstone small enough to carry in the palm, Arkansas stone, sandstone, any fine-grained rock, kept the knife sharp daily. A dull knife is not merely inefficient. In field conditions, it causes slipping, causes wounds, wastes energy, and fails at precision work. When Jim Kleiman sat in the Dakota dirt in 1823 and sewed Jedediah Smith's ear back to his skull with needle and thread, that needle was sharp because these men maintained their tools religiously. A whetstone is not a luxury item. It is the thing that keeps every other cutting tool in the bag functional. The eighth item is tobacco and pipe. Raise an eyebrow if you want, but in the Rocky Mountain fur trade, tobacco was a trade currency as reliable as silver. Russell's ledger shows tobacco purchases on nearly every Fort Hall visit. It bought moccasins from native women who were master leather workers. It bought guides, goodwill, and intelligence about the terrain ahead. It also served a survival function that no modern gear manual will mention. The ritual of the pipe established trust in seconds and in territory shared by the Blackfeet. The crow, the snake, and the knees purse. That trust was the difference between trading and fighting. The ninth item is trade goods, small quantities of seed beads, vermilion paint, and brass hardware. Russell bought one bunch of seed beads at Fort Hall for $1 on August 5, 1834, alongside a pair of ready-made Snake Indian moccasins for 62.5 cents. These were not souvenirs. They were the economic infrastructure of a world without currency. Kit Carson famously relied on Arapaho and Cheyenne women for the cold-weather clothing that kept him alive during winters when most men refused to travel. The trade goods made that access possible. In the Mountain Man system, no item was purely social. Everything earned its weight in survival outcomes. The 10th item is pemmican and jerky, dense, fat-rich, high-protein food requiring no fire, no preparation, and no refrigeration. Pemmican is pounded dried meat combined with rendered fat and sometimes dried berries, packed in skin bags. Originally a technology of the Plains peoples, it was adopted wholesale by the fur brigades because it solved one specific problem. You cannot always stop to cook, and you cannot always light a fire. A man moving through Blackfoot territory in January ate pemmican from his hunting bag while walking. Properly made pemmican contains roughly 4,000 calories per pound and lasts years without spoiling. Modern energy bars, by comparison, offer around 1,000 calories per pound, require plastic packaging, and have a shelf life measured in months. No subscription required for pemmican, just skill, fat, and time. The 11th item is the powder measure and horn, true mountain man. Powder horns were scraped translucent, the outer surface ground thin enough to see light through, so the trapper could check his powder level at a glance without opening the horn and exposing the powder to weather. The adjustable powder measure dispensed a precise charge every single time. Consistent powder charge meant consistent accuracy. Consistent accuracy meant whether you ate tonight and whether you survived the encounter you couldn't avoid. These were not romantic affectations. They were engineering decisions made under mortal pressure. The 12th item is the most unexpected, castoreum, the oily, musky secretion from beaver castor sacs, carried in a small container fashioned from an antelope horn tip, scraped translucent and sealed with a carved plug. Ruxton described old trapper Bill Williams wearing his antelope horn vial around his neck alongside the hunting bag. Castoreum was beaver bait, A single drop near a submerged trap was enough to draw a territorial beaver within range, but it also had medicinal applications well understood by native peoples and adopted by the trappers. As an analgesic, a fever reducer, and a wound treatment, modern analysis has confirmed that castoreum contains salicylic acid, the active compound in aspirin. These men were carrying aspirin in an antelope horn 2 centuries before a pharmaceutical company put it in a tablet and charged you for the packaging. So, why did we abandon all of it? Three reasons compounding each other. Speed. The Industrial Revolution could not afford a labor force that cured its own leather, cast its own bullets, and smoked its own pemmican. Cost. A self-sufficient man with a hunting bag and a bullet mold was a man who bought very little, and commercially speaking, that made him useless to an emerging consumer economy. And technology, refrigeration, and mass production arrived in the 1840s and 1850s and replaced the integrated kit one item at a time, each replacement looking like progress. But the system was not a collection of items. It was a philosophy of total self-reliance. Pull one thread, and the whole fabric unravels. The timeline does not lie. The displacement of this knowledge maps almost exactly to the rise of what we now call survival anxiety. The creeping modern realization that when the signal drops, most people have no idea how to function. If you want to start reclaiming this, begin with the easiest entry point. Find a fire steel and make your own char cloth. Place a small piece of cotton denim in a sealed tin with a pinhole in the lid. Set it in a fire for 5 minutes. Pull it out, let it cool, open it. The cloth inside will be black and ready to catch a spark and hold it. Use it once and you will understand precisely what a Rocky Mountain trapper understood 200 years ago, that fire is not a product. It is a skill, and the tools that unlock it cost nothing you don't already own. If you want to go further, find a fixed blade high carbon knife, not a folding multi-tool, and learn to keep it sharp on a natural stone. And if you want the floor level minimum, make the char cloth tin, put it in whatever bag you carry, because the mountain men already solved every problem the modern survival industry is charging you to solve. And they solved it with 12 items, a leather bag, and the discipline to maintain both. Osborne Russell, Hugh Glass, Jedediah Smith, John Coulter. These men were not primitive. They were engineers working in a discipline where failure was fatal, and every item in that hunting bag had earned its place through real seasons and real deaths. Nothing survived in the kit that hadn't justified its weight in actual survival outcomes. That is a standard that not one item on a modern survival retailer's shelf has ever been held to. The knowledge was not lost. It was traded away for convenience. We were charged for the replacement and then blamed when the replacement broke. Subscribe if you're done being sold things that fail when it matters. We are digging up the integrated survival knowledge, the industrial world buried under a century of marketing. And tell us in the comments, what piece of old world self-reliance do you want us to investigate next? Water purification, field medicine, natural navigation, cold weather shelter. Wherever you want to go, we will follow the primary sources all the way there.